So consider this part two, y'all. This gonna be a longer one because I'm gonna try and give you all the information I can so we can progress through the rest of the chapter. If you go to my collections, for the last time I went through Revelation chapter 6. I did a whole 3-minute video on the vision that Zechariah saw involving these horses and these horsemen, which brought judgment. God used them to bring judgment upon the land. This is where we get the interpretation or get the understanding as to what these four horsemen ultimately represent. So to get that explanation, you'll have to look that up on your own. So we left off at the black horse, right? And it was bringing famine and also inflation. And it's interesting because the famine really only affects the necessary things for living. You know what I'm saying? Like necessary food, olive oil and wine. I mean, we could pretty much live without. When the Lamb fractured the fourth seal, I heard the fourth living being, the one like an eagle, say, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a greenish mucus-colored horse. Its rider's name was Thanatos, and Hades followed close on its heels. Authority was given to them over 1/4 of the earth. Their killing spree went on and on. Now, I think this is worth noting, over 1/4 of the earth, meaning that this judgment or these judgments is not going to affect the entire earth or the whole world, but a specific part of the world, namely Jerusalem and the surrounding areas. Anyway, so the killing spree went on and on. It was fueled by the sword, by famine, by thanatos, which is pestilence or death. It could be translated both ways, and by the wild beasts, the wild animals of the earth. Now, before we get to the souls underneath the altar, I want to go back to what Eusebius records as the famine that was taking place 68, 70, 69 AD, because all of that actually happened. All of that was very much fulfilled, and I'm going to show you how. So Eusebius, Church History, Book 3, Chapter 6. He says, taking the fifth book of the history of Josephus again in our hands, let us go through the tragedy of events which then occurred. And like I said, Josephus was alive during that time. Eusebius is writing looking back, you feel me, from like 320 something AD, but Josephus was there. For the wealthy, he says, it was equally dangerous to remain, for under pretense that they were going to desert men, were put to death for their wealth. The madness of the seditions increased with the famine, and both the miseries were inflamed more and more day by day. Nowhere was food to be seen, but bursting into to the houses, men searched them thoroughly, and whenever they found anything to eat, they tormented the owners on the ground that they had denied that they had anything. So the people whose house they break into, they're like, we don't have anything, I swear. So they torture them until they give up everything. Skipping down a little bit, of all evils, indeed, famine is the worst, and it destroys nothing so effectively as shame. Listen to this. Thus, women snatch the food from the very mouths of their husbands and children, from their fathers, and what was most pitiable of all, mothers from their babes. This was clearly a terrible time, guys. And while their dearest ones were wasting away in their arms, they were not ashamed to take away from their last drops that supported life. Psst, drop it down some more. To this account, Josephus, after relating other things, adds the following. The possibility of going out of the city being brought to an end, all hope of safety for the Jews was cut off. So going out of the city, that's going out of Jerusalem. It wasn't happening. And the famine increased and devoured the people by house and families, and the rooms were filled with with dead women and children, the lanes of the city with corpses of old men. That's crazy. Children and youths swollen with the famine, wandering about the marketplaces like shadows, and fell down wherever the death agony overtook them. The sick were not strong enough to bury even their own relatives, and those who had the strength hesitated because of the multitude of death and the uncertainty as to their own fate. So here's somebody that Josephus interviewed. There was a certain woman named Mary that dwelt beyond Jordan, whose father was Eleazar of the village of Bethazor, which signifies the house of Hesop. She was distinguished for her family and her wealth, and had fled with the rest of the multitude to Jerusalem and was shut up there with them during the siege. Why she fled to Jerusalem is beyond me, because those Christians that believe Jesus' words about when Jerusalem was surrounded by armies, they fled from Jerusalem and went to where this woman came from. The tyrants had robbed her of the rest of her property, of the rest of the property which she had brought with her into the city from Perea. Perea is the city that the Christians fled to. And the remnants of her possessions and whatever food was to be seen, the guards rushed in daily and snatched away from her. This made the woman terribly angry, and by her frequent reproaches and imprecations, she aroused the anger of the rapacious villains against herself. But no one, either through anger or pity, would slay her, and she grew weary of finding food for others to eat. The search, too, was already become everywhere difficult, and the famine was piercing her bowels and marrow, and resentment was raging more violently than famine. Taking therefore anger and necessity as her counselors, she proceeded to do a most unnatural thing. Here's a warning, y'all. You're not going to like this. Seizing her child, a boy which was sucking at her breast, she said, "O wretched child, in war, in famine, in sedition, for what do I preserve? For what do I preserve you, or preserve thee? Slave among the Romans we shall be, even if it were allowed to live by them. But even slavery is anticipated by the famine, and the rioters are more cruel than both. Come, be food for me, a fury for those rioters, and a byword to the world. For this is all that is wanting to complete the calamities of the Jews." Verse or paragraph 28, 29 just talks about, it just details how she roasted her child basically and ate half of them. Some robbers came in, you feel me? They smelled the smell. They're like, "What the hell is that?" She's like, "It's my child, have some." They were mortified, as you should be, you feel me? And she basically called them wimps, and they left, you feel me? I ain't finna finish reading that, but anyways. Paragraph 31, those that were suffering from the famine now longed for death, and blessed were they that had death before hearing and seeing miseries like these. Such was the reward which the Jews received for their wickedness and impiety against the Christ of God. Notice what Eusebius relates this to. Now, I don't have time to develop all of this, but actually it would do you some good to go back and read Deuteronomy 28, because God tells the people of Israel that if you turn your hearts away from me and you begin to serve other gods, I'm going to allow your enemies to besiege you. Notice what he says all the way back in Deuteronomy. What will happen? We'll go through this section. "And it shall besiege you in all your gates until your high and fortified walls in which you trusted come down throughout your land. And it shall besiege you in all your gates throughout your land, which Yahweh your God has given you." Verse 53, "Then you shall eat the offspring of your own body, the flesh of your sons and of your daughters, whom Yahweh your God has given you, during the siege and the distress by which your enemy will oppress you. The man who is refined and very delicate among you shall be hostile toward his brother, towards the wife he cherishes, and towards the rest of his children who remain. Thus says the word of the Lord, y'all." Anyways, this was a great tribulation, y'all. That siege that happened to Jerusalem leading up to 68, 69, 70 AD, that was a terrible time. And guess how many years that was? 3 years. And we're going to revisit that. We're going to go back to what Eusebius writes about and recounting what Josephus recorded. Anyways, y'all, let's get to the fifth seal.